Welcome everyone to this wonderful Zoom event we have with our speakers who are far-flung today. That is the beauty of Zoom. I am Katie Porter. I'm Executive Director of Inlandia. And before we begin, I would like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, both here where I am in Riverside, California, as well as where our speakers are. The Tongva, Luiseno, Gabrieleno, and Serrano peoples, as well as the Ohlone peoples and the Chumash. And we thank them for allowing us to live and work on their ancestral homelands. So with us today, we have Stephanie Barbé Hammer. Her most recent book is Journey to Marveille City. I don't speak French. I have to practice. And she teaches Inlandia's Poet Try workshop series. So we're really thrilled to have her today. And she will be in conversation with Jane Edberg. Jane Edberg's art has been published and exhibited internationally. She is the author of the illuminated memoir, The Fine Art of Grieving. So welcome, Jane. And lastly, we have John Brantingham, whose latest book, Gone Back to Wild, is forthcoming next month in June. He is the founder and general editor of the Journal of Radical Wonder. So welcome, Stephanie, Jane, and John. And let me pull you up, John. There we are. And thank you all. And I'm very excited to hear your conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie, and thank you so much, friends, for joining us as we talk to Jane and John about their absolutely incredible new book, My Dead, and we'll hear a little bit about the course that they're planning on teaching connected to it. And just to start things off, what we thought we'd do is show you a little bit of the book, and Jane is going to do that so you can see just how gorgeous it is.
All right, let me share my screen here and get us started. And here's the lovely front cover of our book. And then I'm going to move to our first poem. John?
All right, this is 4:30 a.m. I take my morning tea outside to see if the sun is coming up yet. Across the alley, a possum stops and watches me, trying to intimidate me, maybe, or maybe he's just watching. Someone last night must have thought my car with its busted headlight was abandoned. They spread a blanket over it to dry. I wonder where they are now that they do not need their blanket. I wonder where they were when it got wet.
So amazing. Yeah, maybe let's just sort of pause for a second and just take this all in. You've seen it many times, you guys, but we haven't. Just kind of call everybody's attention to this interest in the spectral and sort of absence, which isn't absence. And yet Tiffany shares, damn that last line. Yeah, that turn at the end. And the way the picture does these sort of funny turns on us also, that we think we know what we're looking at, but do we know what we're looking at? Is what we are looking at here, or someplace other than here that we're somehow getting a glimpse of? And that's it, for me at least, as a reader, very much what this book is about. Okay, so I think we're ready for the next one, Jane.
Here we go.
The churn. We live in a loft in the back of the old post office in Ontario, built in 1926. At night, my dad whispered to me that this is not an ancient place. It's not even old. They whisper that no place on earth is. They tell me the ground is churning, slower than water, but replacing itself still.
Yeah. And again, I just want to give everybody a couple of minutes to take a look at these heads and the way they're communicating or not communicating, and the layers that we're seeing at the bottom of the picture. These are such the words are so complex, and the pictures are so complex too. So what I would like to do now is maybe ask the two of you to talk a little bit about how this project even got started. It's so remarkable and fascinating.
Okay, I'm going to stop share.
Yeah, thanks.
There we go. There we are.
Okay, well, do you want to go first?
No, please go first. You're good at going first.
Okay. Well, I'd been working on these. It was during COVID, and I was just working on these just to kind of work my way through it. You know, we were in the complete shutdown, and it was pretty well, you all know what it was like. I had just rented a loft, and we'd opened a very small a gallery, art gallery, but it was all concrete walls. So as soon as we shut down, we were stuck inside concrete walls and there's no windows for just 24/7. There was no day or night, and so I just started writing. And I started writing these almost as journal entries. And then Jane contacted me, and she was just asking me what I was doing. Was I doing anything artistically? I sent her one of the poems, and then Jane, you.
Yeah, it struck me that they had this simplicity, but as you linger in the poem, it's not simple at all, that there are some things that are going much deeper. And I thought, God, I would love to illustrate these. Like, I just felt this emotional connection to what he was trying to say without saying anything really about COVID necessarily, but just that sense of isolation and some of the things that pop up that we hadn't, I don't know about you, but for me, I hadn't thought of in a long time. And I love the idea of this sort of thing about time and about things being ancient or not ancient, and what are we hearing, and what are our voices in there, or what are the other voices that are in there. I think that I was so moved by his poetry that I had to ask him, what do you think? Do you think it would be okay if I illustrated? And then I thought, I don't want to illustrate these. This is not illustration. What I want to do is speak to them. I want to talk back. I want to have a conversation with the work that he's producing, which is an etymphrastic point of view, sort of the opposite of ekphrastic, or ekphrastic is writing to art. Now the art is, addressing the poem.
Yeah, and I
Wow.
think you see that really clearly in 4:30 a.m. What that illustration not illustration, the art that you did there. Because I didn't talk about two people together like that, and I didn't talk about sharing intimacy in the way that you do, but that's the way you interpreted it, and I really appreciated that.
That particular one was interesting, the 4:30, because that blanket became everything, and not, well, everything in terms of getting to understand that there are things that we don't see in the world that are happening outside of ourselves and outside of our lives, but there are all these little indications. And I love that sense of, is this a person who's homeless? Is this about someone that's lost and hasn't found their way? Or what is going on? And what does this blanket represent? And I began to imagine and fantasize about who is loved in the blanket, or who the blanket covered at one point to protect them from the rain, or what it is. Are we all walking around with blankets on top of us that we don't even know,
Right.
about our
or masks.
self? Right, masks.
Or masks.
Yeah,
the whole sort of inside outside being protected or being muffled, or both, which is
and then being interior, having to stay in a lot more. and not being able to come into contact with people as much as we would like to. And here we are butting up against someone else's humanity. And I found that very moving and kind of frightening, even to consider that there are people in worse off conditions. We might have felt like we were struggling, and here are people that are, they really don't have anywhere to go. And
absolutely.
Yeah, so that was interesting to me.
So I just want to be sure that I understand the terms right. So ekphrastic is writing in response to a piece of art. That's ekphrastic.
Yes.
But what we're doing, Jane, in this book is, I have to look at the word, etymphrastic, which is art being made responding to writing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, and I liked I think that's been going on for ages, but I wanted to have a term, and I asked John about it, and he knew the etymology of words fairly well. So I asked him about what could we call this, and we kind of both came up with it, but I was solidly thinking it was, there's got to be an etymphrastic, so that it's not just illustration. One of the frustrations I've had as an artist is people assuming that I'm illustrating if I draw something for somebody. Sometimes I am. Sometimes I'm getting the information from them and I'm trying to make it look like what they want it to look like. But in this case, this is my art, and this is how I responded with my art to something that John had written. And sometimes, and he brought this up and I found it so interesting, he said, sometimes I even argue with what he's saying, or say something different, or outside of it, or question it, or push and pull on it, which is fantastic, Yeah,
that was something that I actually loved about the book as it proceeded. And everybody, when you get your copy, you'll have such a great time kind of seeing how there's sometimes a conversation, as there is in 4:30 a.m. and in Churn. But in one of my personal favorites, which I don't think that you've got a PDF of, but you can make a note of it, everybody, and look it up. Noon, the picture seems to be doing something very different from what the words are doing. They're talking to each other, but John's piece is kind of about not believing in God or believing in the metaphysical. And the picture, I won't say anymore because I don't want to ruin it for you, but the picture is actually suggesting something quite different. So there are these the point being that there are these wonderful ways that the images and the poems kind of talk to each other and sometimes butt against each other. And with that in mind, I'm wondering if we should take a look at the rain is what matters.
Let's do that. Okay. Sharing my screen, and we'll go to the next image. There we go.
The rain is what matters. I fall asleep to the sounds of my dead, whispering underneath the rain outside. Their voices stay with me into unconsciousness, and they give me dreams of great significance. Dreams always seem important. Whatever they mean, I will forget them tomorrow morning.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And of course, just something we talked about before the recording started is that my dead is, of course, which is the title of the book, is a phrase that gets used very early on in the poetry collection and then comes back as a kind of a refrain. So we continue to come back to this question of who are my dead? Where are they? Can they talk to me? Do I understand them? And let's talk about this picture.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Wow. The clock. These different heads making these utterances. Whoa, wow. It's just an incredible image.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And the tears coming out of the eyes of the sleeper. I think it's just gorgeous.
Yes. Yeah. So Jane, what was your process for this picture?
I think when John says the rain is what matters, it's not just about water and needing water. It's also about needing nurturing and needing catharsis and needing a place to share our collective, experience. I thought of this sleeping person as a kind of universal person who is trying to speak about some kind of shared grief, but instead all these tears come, but everyone's lapping it up because everyone's feeling the same way. And I think that was a big part of the COVID experience, is that people were in
Yeah.
deep grief, either from losing loved ones or from fear of they're going to lose their own lives. There was so much going on around grief and death and sorrow that there was sort of a strange sense of sharing, but it was all separated by 6 feet. I mean, it was like we
Yeah.
had some weird restrictions that made it. I don't think we've even still gone there in terms
I
of the
agree.
depth of what's happened, and on so many levels, whether it's political or global or, spiritual or whatever. Um, but it's about swallowing all of our experience. And then there's that red is like this opened up palette, and we can look past into the mouth of the universe. That we're in a bigger picture than what we think. This is not just this small picture, there's a bigger picture.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
You do such a wonderful job, I think, of expressing that pictorially, that it feels it's such a, in some ways, troubling picture, and yet also expansive and hopeful. And this is why I love talking to artists, everybody. I hadn't made the nurturing connection. I hadn't when I looked at it, but the minute you said that, Jane, I went, oh, of course. There's this huge desire that we all had during COVID, and that I think we have still now after COVID.
Yeah.
Wanting to share, wanting to say, this was my experience. This is what it was. This is what it was. What's yours? I need to say mine, and I also need to swallow yours. It's again, it's sort of mutual nurturing.
We
We
needed to know what was happening to each other,
Right,
and
absolutely.
another interesting thing about his poem is that when he says, they give me dreams of great significance, but then at the end, he's like, I'm going to forget them. And it's like, that's what happens. We get dissolved by our experience that's so overwhelming that we forget what is significant, what is the big dream, and the big dreams have been crushed, haven't they? I mean, we all had them, and we all look towards, the future and think, gosh, what have we got now and what's going on? So I think there's that inside of that. And the clock really is, splitting time, and time.
Yeah.
There sort of is no time. And there is all the time in the world, but whether we're going to be here or not is another question.
Yeah. Yeah. And certainly that sense that we had during COVID, that we had too much time on our hands because we couldn't do all the little dreams that we had. Oh, I'm going to spend my birthday with so and so. I'm going to go out to the movies and do this. So little dreams we couldn't do. And also the question, how much time does each of us have? Because death certainly felt very present, I think, to all of us, which reminds me, John, I noticed on the back of your book that one of the blurbs you have is our beloved poet friend Gerald Laughlin, who was one of the first victims of COVID.
Oh,
And I just thought we could maybe glide into what, John, some of your influences are as a writer, and Jane, what some of your influences are.
Great. I'm going to stop share. There we go.
Well, Jerry was certainly there in a number of ways, and I was thinking about him when I was writing My Dead, right? And
he's one of them.
He's one of them. He's definitely one, and he's also from the same city my family's from, so he has the same accent, Rochester, New York, right? So it kind of felt like my family, most of whom had just passed before he did. And then also the book. I started off as a stand-up poet out of the Long Beach tradition, and I actually moved away from Long Beach so that I could get away from that and maybe move on with my poetry because it started becoming repetitive with me. I started using humor as a kind of a crutch I couldn't get in. But this is a return to stand-up poetry in a lot of ways, without the humor. And not all stand-up poetry has. Does everybody know what stand-up poetry is? Stand-up
No,
poetry.
maybe explain.
Yeah, it's a type of poetry that kind of comes out of Charles Bukowski, who I don't like very much, but it is meant like stand-up comedy to be understood immediately upon reading, but then also have if you read it over again, it has a complexity and a depth that you missed the first time, right? So it's got this sort of very often because it works like stand-up comedy, there's humor, and it's not till later that you realize the humor undercuts something of greater significance, right? And so I'd been writing that for years, and I left Long Beach because I didn't want to be I wanted to move on with my career. But then when we started getting in this, and Jerry died, and I started thinking about all of this stuff, I returned to stand-up poetry with this, without the humor, so that again you could understand it, but it had some complex depth so that if you read it again, you like, okay, there's more going on here, and I can meditate. And so, okay, so for this collection, certainly Jerry was an influence. Kareem Tayar, um, uh, well,
Yeah.
Robbie Nestor is always influence to me. I love her work so much. And so just uh, not Charles Bukowski because I don't like his stuff, but Ron Kurchi certainly. All of these people who kind of came up with that movement. Joan Job Smith. Her work always influences me. Fred Voss. So if you don't know all of these people, it's okay. They're very much of a region, of a place. You either know all of them all at once, or you've never probably heard of any of them except for Bukowski. But it's a fabulous movement. They're fabulous poets, and you can, if you're in the Los Angeles area, which I think most of you are, you can go down to Long Beach most nights, and there's a reading going on featuring them.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's great. I always love to ask artists to talk about kind of their lineages, and their ancestry,
Yeah.
who they look to. What about you, Jane? I put in a note to you. Am I crazy that I see Chagall in some of your work? You
No,
feel
I
free to
think
tell
it's
me I'm
probably,
crazy.
no, I think it has to do with some of the color, and just the fantastical kind of imagery, but um, he's not an influence of mine, but I do admire his work. I have really different sorts of influences. I have to say that Joni Mitchell is one of my big influences, both words and painting. I love her work. I love her. I think she's brilliant and needs better, celebration. She's starting to get some of that, but she's certainly someone who moved me from a very young age until even recently. And Diane Arbus, who is a photographer who photographed what people would call the freaks, right? And she said, those are my people, And she photographed people that were unusual, otherness, that were on the outskirts of life or just very different. And she didn't do it to make them out as different. What she did was she showed their humanity, and it was really, she's just a beautiful photographer. And Peter Max. Now, Yellow Submarine, can you
Yes,
see?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I see that.
So
Yeah.
it is totally there. I love Peter Max for his simplistic, colorful, crazy whimsy. Dr. Seuss. There are a lot of cartoon artists that I love. And I have a lot of different styles too. I don't have just one style, so I'm sort of a curator's nightmare because I'll make work about one thing and then do something. I've never really drawn quite like this before. This just happened because of this work. Yeah.
Interesting. So how did the process work? I love that this is a book that is a conversation that started with a conversation between the
Yeah.
two of you.
Yeah.
What was your process for writing the book? How did that happen?
So for me, it was we were in this tiny little sphere, this tiny little space, and I like to, anybody who knows me knows I like to hike a lot, and I was in Ontario, California, right on the corner of Euclid and Mission, and so the least, about as far away as you can get from the forest as you could possibly go. And but I get up. I didn't want to run into anybody because I didn't want to risk COVID. So I get up at dawn and I'd start walking, and I'd come back and I'd just write the poems just from observations. So these are all just things I saw on the street. And then when Jane started to draw to these, I started doing it with consultation with her and more intention. And so
Very interesting. So so you would go out in the morning thinking, okay, I want to make something that I can then send to her.
yeah.
What am I going to look at? Was it that kind of thing?
Yeah, and so I'd get up and I'd walk down. So if you know Ontario, you know what I'm talking about. It's if you don't know Ontario, it's just the same as Pomona. And so like I'd walk down to the methadone clinic and I'd like see how people are interacting there, or I'd go down to the museum where a lot of people were unhoused and trying to live in a way that they not going to get sick. Or I'd walk along the train tracks, just something so I could go out and I could see how people are dealing with COVID, how people are living. What is this distance that we've created with each other?
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
see. So then we would write something, then you'd email it or text it over to Jane.
Yeah.
And then Jane, what did you do?
So I would print them out, and well, we had a little bit of a conversation about it, and from just reading one or two, I kind of got an idea of what it looked like very quickly. And when I did an artwork, and I was like really embarrassed. I'm like, I can't even remember which the first one was. Was it the 4:30 a.m.?
It might have been. That,
Might have
that, that was
been.
a very early poem.
Yeah. And I thought, oh God, he's going to think this is like too bizarre, or I don't know. I was very nervous about it. And I sent it, and he went, wow, this is amazing.
Oh gosh.
And I went,
so
oh,
you
yeah,
had to really perform an act of trust
I'll
and
tell you,
send this off to John.
it's huge
Mm.
act of trust to, I think even just illustrating people's work is an act of trust, but when you're not illustrating and you're doing your own thing and throwing it at them, it's like, are they going to think, oh no, I kind of changed my mind, but he was like gung ho. And interestingly enough, this work got done very quickly. I did one a night, and I stayed up till like probably 1 and 2 in the morning, doing these little drawings and then sending them and waiting to hear whether or not he was approving or not.
Oh my goodness.
And we didn't
and
have,
then
yeah,
Huh.
we didn't have too much conversation about it because we wanted it to be, as real as possible. What did I
wanted
get
the
from this?
flow.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah,
Yeah,
but
well,
yeah, anyway.
the artwork itself was the conversation. We didn't really need to say anything beyond that.
Right. Yeah.
That's fabulous. I love this back and forth. And then Jane, Eric in the chat asked if you drew these images, if you painted them, what were the media that you
Okay,
used?
yeah, that's a good question, because when I first started, I just wanted to do something really quick. So I hadn't been drawing for a while. I'd been writing a book. So I was like, got in the studio, and I just grabbed the quickest materials and the, cheap Bristol board, and I'd sketch something out. But I would take the poem and I would free associate what I saw when I heard the lines of each line. And I would make a little note to myself of what I thought about and what it wasn't showing. And I was like, what is he not saying? There's got to be something here that's even deeper. Like, what is he not saying? Or not deeper, but another deep vein, right? And I'm like, I can be the other deep vein. That'd be really interesting to connect that way. And so, yeah, things would pop up, and I think that's crazy. And then I'm like, okay, I'm just doing it. I'll just see what happens. Let's just do it. And
I
so,
love it. And then you sent it back to him?
yeah, take a picture of it with my, nothing precious here, with my iPhone and send it to him. And that was it. And I don't think we've ever photographed them. Oh, no, we did. We photographed them professionally. I photographed them professionally because I'm a professional photographer. At the very end, when we gave them to Kelsey Books to publish, but they were originally, just phone photos. And I used art markers colored markers and a little bit of gold,
Wow.
felt tip pens and that sort of thing, but nothing very precious.
Oh, I love that. I love that it's markers. That's so
Yeah, they'll fade.
fantastic.
They won't last. They're in
Right.
a
Oh my
dark box
gosh.
somewhere, but yeah. But they're
Oh,
alive in
that's
the book, so
fabulous.
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, I didn't, I should have think to ask you this, but I'm going to ask you this now. I'm really curious as to how each of your art practices or understandings of your art changed through this collaborative experience,
Oh,
because it
that's a
sounds like it did
great
change.
question.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Would you like to start? I'll finish.
I would love to start. I think for me it was personal, and it had to do with trust. And I've always worked fairly solo, or if I have, it's usually been with a friend that I've known for years and years and years, and we are just doing some kind of thing that may never end up on a, in a gallery or anything, just playing. But this seemed like it had a potential somehow, and it almost felt scary. And I was scared, to send something to someone. And I knew John well enough. I'd been to his classes in the Sequoias and hiked with him, and we knew each other a little bit, but not on this more intimate level where I'm sending him something that's so different that he might, not like it. Interestingly enough, it actually healed a part of me about my own insecurities about my art making and my my sense of if I'm working with anybody, if they're going to overpower me or dismiss me somehow, or I've had some bad experiences. So he was always so open and so celebratory about anything that I made, that I felt like, this is so great. And I felt like it inspired me to make better work. And I feel like the work that came out of this, it was every day. I think it was almost every single day for just a few weeks. Like, we made this work like quickly.
Mm.
And it just sort of went boom. And then we're like, oh, should we keep going? But it had reached this point where 20 seemed kind of perfect. And we kind of ran out of juice or something. Like, it had found its own, it's like it had a life of its own. And that was a remarkable thing, trusting another person and trusting the process, like really allowing myself to be free with what I was thinking about in reference to this poetry. And that goes vice versa. When writers are writing to artwork, the same thing happens. They find themselves worried that they're going to make a mistake about what they're looking at, or the same thing can happen. So I think that
Absolutely.
such a wonderful lesson. It was very
Oh, that's great.
yeah.
Yeah, John,
Yeah.
what about you?
So I've worked in collaboration a lot. I really like working in collaboration, and I started because you get trapped by your own ego, and you get locked into the same tricks, the same sorts of statements, and there are things that are deeper and richer inside of you that you won't be able to unlock unless you get outside of yourself. And so one of the problems I had though working in collaboration is I often do it with a former student, and so it's a little bit like they're working with their dad, and
Yeah.
I
The
like that.
power dynamic.
Yeah, it's the wrong power, and so like I don't feel like Jane sees me as her father, which I'm
Not yet.
and so it was a way of me getting out of my own way and trying to see the world in a different, trying to get a new perspective on this. And I thought, okay, well, this is going to be, at first it was just me working, before we started talking. Um, it was, it, I started trying to see things through the point of view of an artist and what's graphic here and what's interesting. There's one poem that we're going to read a little bit later where I saw this palm tree growing up inside this other tree. I thought, oh my God, what would Jane do with this? This is an interesting thing, right? And so I don't think I would have seen that if I hadn't been working with Jane. She gave
that's
me.
good. Well, this really conforms to what my experience of reading the book is, because it feels to me like the pictures change a bit, Jane. And I also felt that about your poems, John. I felt that things were shifting in these interesting ways. And so what I really love too about the conversation the two of you just had about how you changed is you've acted out the rain is what matters picture, which is this mutual nurturing, and my speaking my truth into you, and you're speaking yours, and the universe kind of opening up as a result. I mean, I just love it so much. I'm a little bit mindful of time, and I just want to be sure before we do anything else that you talk a little bit about the class that you're teaching soon.
Yeah, I'd like to say something about that. One of the things that as I was just sharing that sort of emotional and wonderful sense of trust that I gained from working with John, is that it made me think about also ekphrastic. And he's done that too. I've given him artworks and he's written to the artworks. And that's always like, wow, like mind blowing, because it's, you don't know what other people are seeing or what they're going to springboard off of inside of a work that you've done. And so I just think that's fascinating. And I've written lots of ekphrastic poetry. So we're really excited about, I have a background in art, and I taught for 35 years. I taught art appreciation, design, photography, art, lots of it, art history, all of it. And in so doing, I've learned a lot about looking at art and looking at the design elements and principles. And I thought, wow, what if we break that down for the ekphrastic writer? How to look at art and get more out of it and understand what an artist might be doing, or what is line doing? What does shape do? Why are those things important? What's the symbolism of various colors? Just taking a really deep dive into the actual, construction of an artwork and the content that's in the artwork, I think can be very, very informative for the writer.
Yeah.
Yes, because a lot of us don't know anything about that. So yes, that would be useful. Yeah, John, over to you.
Yeah, as an ekphrastic writer, I almost always talk about sort of the cultural significance or the historical significance, maybe some sort of religious dynamic to it, but not. And so I was very much limited when I came to something that's purely abstract. How do unless I'm going to do research and really talk about the process that or the history of the person or whatever, it didn't. But with working with Jana, start working on just responding to this as a piece. Like how do you respond to Malevich as a piece, right? And the way it's constructed and that sort of thing. And it's giving me the component tools to be able to do that, to be able to write. And then not just purely abstract. Then we've got naturalistic types of paintings, and I'm responding also. I'm starting to see new things like what the lines are doing and all of that kind of thing.
Wow. So this class is going to be a workshop. So writers will be coming in to the class and will be looking at about artworks and then responding to them.
Yeah,
and then
it's going to be asynchronous, which means that we recorded, but then I'll be giving prompts every day, and students will be emailing me whatever they feel like emailing me, and to Jane too, and we'll be responding that way. So, and there'll be some office hours as well. But
it sounds mostly wonderful.
Yeah, you'll be able to come back to this again and again. I'm sorry.
How many weeks?
8 weeks.
8 weeks. Okay, 8 weeks, but asynchronous. Oh, that's terrific. Oh,
yeah,
that's
people
great.
Can do it in their own time within the 8 weeks, and they have opportunities to respond to prompts and get feedback from us, but also take these deep dives into looking at not just artworks that are interesting, but breaking down each design element and each design principle So they have a really good formal understanding of how those things operate, how they work, how they change the language of a given artwork so that they can read into them a little more. And I think it's really exciting because I watched John. I've known some of his ekphrastic poems, and I've watched him light up when he sees something different about the way line is directing the eye to something off in the distance, and that becomes an emphasis, which is important. And he's like, oh, wow, you know. So it's like giving them like little maps to help decipher what we're looking at. And I chose some really challenging artworks too, because I think we can only write to something that's a classic or, you know, an impressionist or what have you, and sort of these formal paintings. But I've included some conceptual artwork, some sculpture, some things that are a little more challenging as well as some of the, you know, more classics as well.
So if anybody knows education theory, I am a classic auditory kinesthetic learner. And so like I said to my wife one time, I said, somebody was asking me where we lived. I said, we live in those blue townhouses over yonder. And she looked at me and she said, they're gray. Which is to say I have no visual sort of imagination whatsoever. But this, so I had a hard time with this, but it's opening up my eyes to seeing it in the way that like my wife sees the world and in paintings, and the way certainly Jane does. It's just giving me some new tools in my tool belt.
Yeah, that's a great way to think of it. Yeah.
We all want more tools. This sounds fabulous. I never took, you know, the requisite art history class. I never took it. So I have very few tools. This is a class that I should take. And for folks who were interested, there is a description of the class in the chat. There is also, and I love this, there is also a coupon so that you can get a discount on the class. So do check that out. You know, who doesn't love a coupon? My goodness.
That's right.
This is so great. $10 off. My mother-in-law is very happy, going, yes, coupons, as she called them. The coupon.
Me too. That's what I said.
Yeah, that's
yes, that's how you say it?
At the very bottom. Yeah.
Yeah. So do check those things out. And we have a little bit of time left. Is there a question that I should have asked you guys and didn't, or would you like to look at read another poem and have us look at another image?
It'd be interesting if anybody has a question that's here tonight. Is that possible?
Yeah. Please, you can actually maybe ask your question in the chat if you have a question.
Yeah.
We'll give everybody a few minutes.
So what we can do is we can read a poem, and then if anyone has a question, they can put it in the chat. And I'm going to share my screen. Is that okay, Stephanie?
Right.
Okay.
Yes, go for it.
So we'll be seeing The Rain is What Matters again. Let me forward. There we go.
Okay, so this was I'm just going to tell the story of this one. Because I'd written the poem based on, you know, the way Jane's taught me to see, and then she asked me about the actual place. So in my walk I'd kind of lost it, so I had to come back, and I was looking through Google Earth, and I finally found the right image, and I sent it to her. But this is Canopy. My neighbor's palm tree has hidden its head inside of the canopy of a sycamore, surviving somehow on the light its fronds get when the autumn leaves fall. I'm staring at it when my neighbor comes out to go to work and dead-eyes me, wondering what I'm doing, standing in front of his place in the shadow of the street light pre-dawn, my hoodie up. I head down the street toward the 7-Eleven. I won't go inside. This is the place he gets his coffee to move him into the day.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorites.
Oh,
and I really love the image, and it feels again, me, being very ignorant about art history, it feels a little woodcutty to me. It feels a little sort of hokusai-ish to me. It's just so beautiful, and gosh, what I feel, back to something that you all said very early in this conversation about, I think it was Jane said, we all know what COVID was like, and we do, but it's so hard to talk about it still.
Mm.
It's so hard, I think, to kind of express what that was like. And I think both of you really do that with these 2 pages. This sort of,
it's interesting. I was in a department meeting and on Zoom, of course, right at the end of this, and the chair asked us, the 50 of us, how you feeling? And finally, no one was talking, and I stood up and they said, I don't know. I don't know how I'm feeling. I had no way of describing that, and I'm sure you all know what that was like. It was beyond description.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're really, I know I am just in everyday conversation trying to find the words to talk about COVID and what it kind of, what it did to me as a social person. It made me realize I'm incredibly extroverted. That was like the good thing. But I feel that I was talking to some people about this. I feel like I'm relearning how to engage with groups because I got so completely out of the habit of kind of talking to people, talking to strangers in particular, that I'm having to kind of relearn all of these social skills. And I just love this. I'm staring at it when my neighbor comes out, and there's a whole sort of sub thread in this collection about neighbors and who's a neighbor and who isn't, and who is it safe to connect with, and who isn't it safe with connect with. And please say a little bit more about that, about the neighbors question.
Well, interesting. It's not a part of the book, but the reason we moved out of there is one of my neighbors just decided one day he was going to chase me down the street, and he was threatening my life, and he was coming. We think it was the guy with the Confederate flag down the street who was doing this, but we're not entirely sure. But the neighbor thing was important because we're in what was supposed to be about the most social thing possible. We're in a business that was meant to have regular art walks, and our neighbors were all artists who were there to show their stuff. But then also our neighbors are the people who are unhoused around us, and the people who lived in government housing right next to us, and also people who were just had a lot of money. There's all this strange mix of people. And as I was being kept away from the people I normally associate with, I was, interacting with these people that I don't normally associate with, just kind of seeing them, saying, there's also what those gyms where they push over large tires and things.
CrossFit.
They CrossFit, yeah. There was a CrossFit thing and every morning at 6 a.m. they'd start the, welcome to the jungle music and flipping things over, and they go running around together, breathing each other's air. So they were the neighbors too.
Yeah.
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 I see Robbie mentions in the chat, and thank you so much. Robbie talks about what a difficult time that was, and how she's only now having kind of vivid memories appear. There's been this kind of necessity of a sort of lag time. So that feels very right to me.
Yeah. I think that because there was so much COVID got politicized, right? And I think that ended up where you couldn't talk about it without it getting weird. So I don't know. I don't know too many people that were comfortable bringing up a conversation. It's almost as though everybody just decided we weren't going to ever talk about it and just keep moving forward.
Yes. We're back to normal. I hear a lot about that. We're back to normal. And I'm thinking we are so not back to, there's no going back.
There's no
I
back.
think there's probably,
Yeah.
yeah.
I got
Um,
a direct message personal question if I could read that.
I'm gonna
Please.
stop sharing. There we go.
Eric asked, how would the book be different if I wrote and Jane responded in art if instead of that I responded to Jane's art? Yeah, I think it'd be very, very different. We actually have worked on that a little bit because her art is phenomenal, and it's I started to respond to some of her stuff. She was starting to make, and there's a spiritual element to it that made my poetry very, very, oh, I don't know how to say, well, sort of spiritually engaged and talking about things in a way I usually don't talk about them. It's
So she
talking.
pushed you in interesting ways to talk about things that you don't normally feel comfortable talking about. That's great.
Even I'm not aware of it, and so it had kind of an element of my Catholic childhood training, right? That I'm talking about the same way that the hymns are told, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
That's wonderful.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I invite anybody to write about my artwork. That would be so interesting.
That'd be
So
a different class and a good one.
Yeah, that's right.
right. Well, maybe that's next. Maybe that's the next book is to reverse the roles.
Yeah.
Do you have any final thoughts for our audience, Jane and John?
I do, in that I think that finding the freedom in yourself to engage with artworks or engage with writing, if you're an artist, you may find that interesting. Because you do learn something. You do have to push your ego out of the way in a way to be able to connect to what somebody else is doing. But there's also a kind of freedom to it as well. And not to be afraid to use the artwork as a springboard or the poetry as a springboard. I think that's really important to know. I think we have to be respectful sometimes, depending on where the image or the writing comes from. It could be from a very particular culture that we need to understand and engage in. But I think that I think we learn a lot about each other. And like John said, it opens up an area inside yourself that you might not have considered, which is always wonderful. It's like, oh, where was that? That was tucked away somewhere. That's pretty interesting. So I think you learn about yourself and you learn about others, and it's socially engaging, and there's a collective unconscious out there that we can all kind of pool back and forth into.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, but it's almost like doing an epistolary. The other thing is John lives in New York and I live in Monterey, in California. And, we haven't seen each other in a few years and we created a book. And so I love that we can do these sort of epistolary exchanges of writing and drawing. And we've worked on another project with two other folks, which is kind of similar. Like I did the artwork in the Ekphrastic way, but that can be done also in the Ekphrastic way. So I hope people will join us for the Ekphrastic class, because I think it's going to be
absolutely
a really different experience.
Sounds great.
Yeah. So the thing about the arts is they're a 10-20,000 year long conversation about the nature of life and death, and it keeps becoming more and more complex. But what's really important is there's never ever been anybody who has your point of view. There's never ever been anybody who's been like you. And you sharing and giving yourself the freedom to talk about the artwork in your own way, in a way that fights past convention, ennobles us, right? It allows us to see things in a completely different way. It allows us a greater access to the human experience, something I never would have seen before. So I hope people engage in ekphrasis and anaphrasis and all of these sorts of conversations. What we were talking about in the Gilgamesh saga, we're still talking about today, but in a more complex way.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah,
indeed.
that's
Well,
great.
gosh, that's a wonderful note to end on. Everyone, thank you so much for coming. Please buy the book. please consider taking the class. And thank you so much, Inlandia Institute, for hosting us.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much to everybody for showing up.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Inlandia.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.